I am filing this record 11 years late. That is unusual for an Academy archivist, and I will note the reason before I note anything else. Instructor Commander Haleth Das filed the initial incident report the same week. I read it when it came across my desk for cross-referencing, and I set it aside for 2 days, and then I filed it without comment. What I filed was accurate in every verifiable particular: signal times, trajectory data, crew counts, injury classifications, and incomplete in every way that mattered. I was a junior records clerk of 22, and I did not think it was my place to annotate a commander's report with what I had seen in the observation gallery above the live fire range. Thought someone else would do it. Someone senior. Someone with the standing to write it plainly. No one did. So I am doing it now, with 11 years of standing behind me and the rank of senior archivist or keeper to my name, and I am writing it plainly. What happened on the 14th day of the 6th interval, in the 3rd year of the Veteran Imperial Combat Academy's current command rotation, was this. The Academy misfired a training beacon into human space. A human freighter answered. Instructor Commander Haleth Das, who had spent 14 years building a professional reputation on the documented fragility of the human species, did not finish the lecture he had been delivering when the beacon fired. He never gave that lecture again. I am going to tell you exactly what I saw. The Academy's live fire range occupies a stretch of empty corridor space, roughly 9 light seconds across, bracketed by 2 navigational buoys and a relay station that dates to the early expansion period. Cadets in their 3rd tier. The tier where they transition from simulation combat to controlled live engagement, use the range for what is officially called Coordinated Emergency Extraction Drill. The exercise is simple in concept. The cadet unit deploys into the range in light scout frames, simulates a system failure, or combat casualty, fires the unit's emergency extraction beacon, and then executes a holding pattern until the Academy's range authority vessel arrives to confirm extraction. The point of the drill is not survival technique. The point is command composure. Staying functional under the pressure of a real beacon, real timer, a real vessel inbound, real consequence if the extraction formation is wrong. The beacon they use for the drill is an Imperial Standard Distress Marker, Class 2, a military-grade signal device that broadcasts on the Empire's emergency extraction band and also, by technical requirement dating to the Joint Navigation Accords, on a secondary cross-spectrum frequency that any vessel in range is required to receive and log. The secondary frequency exists so that independent civilian vessels transiting near a military range are not startled by signal activity they cannot identify. It is a courtesy channel. It is not an invitation. Nobody had updated the Academy's navigational database in 14 years. I want to be precise about this, because the incident report Das filed attributed the misfire to a routine calibration discrepancy in the range marking system, which is technically accurate and almost entirely misleading. The real cause was simpler and more embarrassing. The Empire had extended its border corridor in the 7th interval, 14 years prior to the incident, as part of a territory consolidation that shifted the grid designations for 6 sectors in this part of the frontier. Sector Grid 7, in the old charts, was deep Imperial range. Nothing out there but patrol empty and the Academy's own extended training corridor. In the new charts, Sector Grid 7 was a shared transit corridor, jointly navigated under the Border Passage Agreement, through which civilian freight vessels of any coalition-registered or treaty-aligned species were permitted to operate. The Academy's range systems had never been updated to the new charts, so when the extraction beacon fired that morning, correctly on schedule, as part of a Tier 3 live fire drill involving 12 cadets in 6 scout frames, it broadcast on the secondary cross-spectrum frequency, and the secondary frequency pointed at an area the Academy's system still classified as empty deep range. And the broadcast reached, within its propagation radius, a human bulk cargo freighter called the Callow Run, running a standard freight manifest along the border corridor at approximately 4 light hours distance. The Callow Run logged the beacon. The Callow Run responded. I was in the observation gallery because I was completing a routine logging of the drill sequence. Timestamp, cadet unit designation, range authority response time, extraction formation score, any anomalies. Standard administrative attendance. The gallery is a glass and steel mezzanine above the range operations room, separated from the floor by 2 meters of height and 1 meter of blast-rated glass. You can hear everything said on the floor below if the room is quiet. Instructor Commander Doss was on the operations floor, delivering a pre-extraction lecture to 6 second-tier cadets who were observing the drill rather than participating. This was standard practice. Younger cadets watched the Tier 3 drill as a form of preparation. Doss liked to narrate the exercise as it unfolded, turning it into a lecture on operational stress and command behavior. He was good at it. Whatever else I will write in this record, I will not write that Haleth Doss was a poor teacher. He was an exceptional teacher, in the mode of a commander who has studied warfare with genuine rigor and communicates it with precision and without waste. Particular area of documented expertise was what the Academy's curriculum called force asymmetry and biological limiting factors. He had written the primary text used in Tier 2 instruction. He had 6 published monographs on the subject. The subject, in plain terms, was why certain species could not sustain high-intensity military operations at the scale their technology would otherwise allow, and the central argument of his work was that humanity, despite its considerable technical investment in its armed forces, was biologically, neurologically and temperamentally unsuited to the kind of prolonged, high-casualty, high-stress combat that genuine galactic conflict required. So I had sat through one of his Tier 2 lectures myself a year earlier. When I was tasked with compiling an administrative review of the curriculum's supporting documentation, he delivered it in the large instructional chamber on the Academy's 2nd level, with the gallery full, and he was, I will say it plainly, compelling, not because he simplified the argument but because he did not. He built the case with the patience of someone who had spent years on it and found it interesting, not merely convenient. He showed the neurochemical models. He showed the after-action degradation curves from the engagement records. He showed the documented command structure collapse timelines from 3 separate incidents in contested space, none of which the Vithrons had been party to, but all of which were in the shared navigational archive. He was not contemptuous in his delivery. He was, if anything, clinically sympathetic. The way a physician might discuss a structural limitation of an otherwise functional organism. It is not a judgment, his tone said. It is a finding. The finding was that humans could not go the distance. He had data. He had charts. He had archival footage from 3 cross-species engagements in the past 40 years, none of which involved the Vethran Empire directly, but all of which, he argued, demonstrated the pattern. Humans fought hard in short bursts. Humans broke down under extended stress. Humans required recovery intervals that no serious military force could afford. Their ships were sturdy. Their weapons were adequate. Their individual soldiers were. He was careful about this, in the way of a professional, not without capability. As a sustained fighting force, at scale, over time, decorative, he said, on that morning to the 6 cadets watching from the operations floor. He was talking about something else. Technically, he was discussing the extraction formation the Tier 3 cadets were holding out on the range. The conversation had drifted, as his conversations sometimes did, into his preferred analytical territory. A human fleet is decorative, useful for deterrence against lower-tier threats. Not an asset you plan around in genuine conflict. You plan around them the way you plan around weather. They may be present, they may complicate your operations, but they are not a factor you accommodate in your strategic calculus. One of the 2nd-tier cadets asked a question I could not hear from the gallery. Doss smiled. No, he said, not in a sustained engagement, not at any scale that matters. The physiological data is clear. Their nervous systems generate a stress chemical response at levels that begin to impair function after approximately 70 hours of continuous, high-intensity operation. Their command structure compensates with rotation protocols, but rotation protocols have a throughput ceiling, and every serious conflict exceeds that ceiling within the first month. They know this. Their doctrine reflects it. Short engagement windows, high initial aggression, rapid escalation toward negotiated resolution. They are a sprinting species, not a distant species. The records are unambiguous. The range authority confirmation tone chimed on the operations board. The Tier 3 cadets had successfully fired the beacon. Somewhere on the empty range, 12 young Vethrons, in scout frames, were holding their extraction formation and waiting for the range authority vessel to confirm the drill, pleat. The range authority vessel was still in dock. Because the confirmation channel had just received, from 4 light hours out, a response to the extraction beacon that was not the range authority vessel. The duty officer at the communications console, a young man named Archivist Adjutant Senna, no relation to me despite the name similarity, who has since transferred to the Border Patrol Service and reached the rank of Signals Master, said, at normal speaking volume, because he did not yet understand what he was reading, "Commander, I have a response on the extraction frame band." Doss turned from his cadets. "Range authority is still in dock. Run the identifier." "I did, sir. It's not the range authority, it's..." Senna paused. "It's a civilian freight vessel, human registry. The Callow Run, he was scrolling, out of the third passage station, running a border corridor manifest." There was a silence. "That's not possible," Doss said. "The extraction band doesn't reach the corridor. The range systems have the secondary frequency blocked from civilian traffic." "Sir," Senna said carefully, "they appear to be on the secondary frequency, and they appear to be..." He was reading his console. Could see his shoulders go very still, in the way shoulders go still when the text in front of you is not what you expected. "Sir, they're closing on the range. They're running toward the beacon." Doss crossed to the console in 4 steps. He looked at the screen. He looked at it for long enough that his cadets watching understood something was wrong without understanding what. "They think it's real," he said. "Yes, sir. The beacon went out on the secondary. They picked it up and they think there are casualties on the range." "That appears to be correct." Doss straightened. He had the controlled expression of a man deciding which of several problems to solve first. "Hail them. Identify ourselves. Advise them the beacon is a drill exercise, and they are not needed." Senna opened the channel and delivered the message, cleanly, in the correct format for a civilian traffic notification under border passage protocols. He gave their academy identification, the exercise parameters, the confirmation that all cadets were safe, the all-clear status of the range. The Callow Run acknowledged. The Callow Run maintained course. Senna looked at Doss. "They've acknowledged the advisory, sir. They say they received our identification. They say their standing orders under the Border Passage Agreement require them to complete a visual confirmation at any distress signal site before standing down, regardless of subsequent all-clear notification, when the original beacon was a Class 2 military-grade marker." "That's not a border passage requirement," Doss said. "No, sir. They appear to be citing their own company's protocols. Captain says..." Senna was reading again. I watched his face. "Their captain says, sir, that a Class 2 marker means there are per personnel in open space with at best 20 hours of life support, and that his crew doesn't stand down on an advisory from a party who wasn't on scene for the original signal." From the gallery, I watched Doss take this information in. I want to describe what I saw, because it is the part of the incident that is most difficult to record accurately and most important to record at all. He did not dismiss it. That is the key thing. A lesser officer would have been irritated, would have issued a more forceful advisory, would have treated the approaching freighter as an administrative nuisance. Doss was too experienced for that. He received the information about the Callow Run's standing orders, and something in his assessment of the situation shifted, and I could see it shift. What I saw in his face in the moment of that shift was not irritation. It was the beginning of paying attention. The Callow Run took 3 hours and 40 minutes to cross the 4 light hours to the range boundary. During that time, Doss had his cadets secure the drill and return to dock. The Tier 3 unit did not understand why their exercise had been cut short, and they would be briefed only partially later, and he had the range authority vessel pulled from dock and positioned at the range perimeter, and he had the duty communications officer maintain an open channel with the approaching freighter. I stayed in the gallery. I had my timestamp log and my recording equipment and my administrative credentials, and nobody thought to tell me to leave. I was, at this point, the most thorough administrative observer of an event that was not yet understood to be remarkable by anyone, including me. I was logging, because logging was my function. I was watching because the room was interesting and I was 22, and I had not yet learned to only watch the things I was supposed to watch. During those 3 hours and 40 minutes, became apparent through the communications exchanges that Senna was running. Callow Run was a bulk cargo hauler of approximately 600,000 tons displacement. Its registered manifest listed general freight, construction materials, processed protein, fabrication components, consigned for delivery at the third settlement station, 3 transit days further along the corridor. It had a crew of 9, was standard for a vessel of its class. It was running active suppression systems. This became apparent when the range authority vessel, newly positioned at the perimeter, ran a passive scan as the Callow Run closed the final light hour. Suppression systems are used by military vessels to reduce electromagnetic signature in contested space. Civilian freighters do not use suppression systems. There is no reason for a civilian freighter to use suppression systems. The power cost alone is significant. It is not something you run on a freight run without a specific operational reason. Senna flagged this to Doss without ceremony. Doss read the scan data. He asked the Callow Run about it on the open channel, in the formal mode of a range commander issuing a traffic control inquiry. The Callow Run's captain, I did not know his name then. I know it now, though it does not appear in Doss's incident report, replied with courtesy and without any apparent concern. The suppression systems were standard equipment on vessels transiting the border corridor's outer boundary. In the approach vector they were using, because that approach vector passed through a region of space that the border passage cartographers had flagged as historically active. He did not say active with what. He did not need to. Doss knew the region. Everyone in that part of the frontier knew the region. It was an approach vector that the Empire's own patrol vessels did not use without support. There had been engagement records in that corridor going back 40 years. The Callow Run had been running a freight manifest through a region that veteran patrol commanders wrote mission supplements about, and they had been running it with suppression systems active and, apparently, without visible concern. The second thing that became apparent, the Callow Run had a medical bay that, by the inventory it transmitted when Senna asked for a welfare pre-check under drill completion protocols, was equipped at a level roughly equivalent to an academy infirmary. This is not normal for a civilian freight vessel. Civilian freight vessels carry a standard field kit, enough for basic stabilization, trauma management, emergency stasis. What the Callow Run was carrying included surgical suites, 2 regeneration cradles, a full toxicological analysis unit, and enough blood product storage for a 12-person trauma response, 9-person crew. Medical inventory for 12 trauma patients. Doss stood at Senna's console for a long time when this inventory came through. I was watching from above, and I saw him read it twice, and I saw him look at the range approach track on the navigation display. The calm, steady line of the Callow Run's inbound vector, unwavering, at a pace that was neither aggressive nor dawdling, simply competent. And I saw him do the same thing I had seen him do earlier, the thing that was not irritation. He was paying attention. More attention than before. The third thing, and the last, and the one that closed the interval between what I understood about that morning when it happened and what I understand about it now. When the Callow Run entered final approach, 2,000 kilometers from the range boundary, close enough for optical systems to resolve its hull, the range authority vessel ran a full, passive survey and transmitted the results to Doss's. The Callow Run's hull carried the scars of 4 separate sort engagement actions. I know now from research I did years later that these scars can be read. 2 incidents of weapons impact, 1 incident of what the naval damage assessors call forced close passage, meaning something very large had passed within a few hundred meters at high speed, and 1 incident that the Academy's own technical staff, when I quietly asked them to review the survey imagery 11 years later, this record identified as a breacher charge detonation. Someone, at some point in the Callow Run's service life, had attached a breacher charge to its hull. The ship had survived. It was carrying no military markings. It had no weapons listed on its registry. It was officially entirely a civilian bulk cargo hauler. I want to say something about what those hull scars meant, as an administrative matter, because DOS's incident report treated them as a curiosity, and I think they were not a curiosity. Breacher charge detonation on a civilian hull is not an incident that happens during a misunderstanding. It is not collateral debris damage or a proximity event or a malfunction on another vessel. Charge is a device whose only purpose is to be placed on a hull by an adversarial actor and detonated with intent. Someone, at some point in the Callow Run's service life, had decided that the ship and its crew needed to be destroyed and had taken the specific operational steps required to attempt that destruction, and the Callow Run had survived and made repairs and continued on the run. It had continued the run. It came to rest at the range boundary and hailed the range authority vessel for docking permission. Rose captain came aboard the range authority vessel for the stand post-approach verification meeting. I was not in the room for this meeting. I am recording what I know from Senna, who was, and from the range authority vessel's own log, which I reviewed for this record, and from one additional source I will name at the end. The captain's name was Ren Cassidy. He was, by Senna's description, a compact man, not large, with the unremarkable appearance of someone whose profession involves long transits and quiet efficiency. He was not armed visibly. He wore a freight company jacket over a standard pressure suit liner. He greeted the range authority commander with the same courtesy his crew had shown on the open channel. Calm, professional, neither deferential nor aggressive. He confirmed the distress beacon parameters, reviewed the medical status of the drill cadets via the documentation the range authority commander provided, asked 2 questions about the extraction formation records that suggested he had read the Class 2 beacon documentation carefully, and expressed apparent sincerity and no irony that he was glad everyone was accounted for. The range authority commander asked him about the suppression systems and the medical inventory. Cassie looked the commander for a moment, that Senna described as not uncomfortable, but considered, and then said that his company ran that corridor regularly, and that regular runs on that corridor warranted certain preparations. The commander asked how long his company had been running the corridor. Cassidy said 22 years. The commander asked about the engagement scarring on the hull. Cassidy said the scarring was old. The commander asked if any of it was from the outer approach vector, the one the Empire's own patrols wrote supplements about. Cassidy said some of it was, yes. The commander asked if his company had filed engagement reports with the Imperial Border Authority for those incidents. Cassidy said they had not because the Imperial Border Authority had jurisdiction over Imperial Registry vessels, and the Callow Run was not Imperial Registry. The commander asked what they had done after the engagements. Cassidy said they had made repairs and continued the run. Senna told me, years later when I tracked him down for this record, that there was a quality to the way Cassidy said this. Made repairs and continued the run. That was not boastful and not particularly humble. Not anything Senna had a simple word for. He said it was the tone of a man describing a thing that was true and complete, and that it happened to be true and complete in a way that Senna did not fully know how to hold in his head at the time. I think I know what Senna means. I think the word he does not have is ordinary. Cassidy was describing something ordinary to him, running a freight corridor with engagement history, taking damage, making repairs, continuing the run. These were not exceptional events in the operational life of the Callow Run. They were the texture of the work. Is the part I want the record to hold. Doss was not in the room for the verification meeting. He remained on the operations floor of the Academy building, in the range operations room, while Senna and the range authority commander handled the Callow Run docking. I came down from the gallery when the room was quiet. I had my recording equipment and my timestamp log, and I was supposed to file my administrative attendance report and then leave. Instead, I stood at the back of the room and watched Doss. He was at the navigation console. The Callow Run's approach track was still lit on the display. The calm, steady line of its inbound vector now ended at the range boundary marker, where the ship sat at dock with its suppression systems still passively cycling. He was looking at the hull survey imagery on the secondary screen, the engagement scars. I had been in the academy for 3 years by then. I had processed hundreds of incident reports, drill logs, equipment inventories, personnel records. I had never once seen Haleth Doss look at anything the way he was looking at those hull scars. He was not angry. He was not embarrassed. Or if he was embarrassed, it was very far down underneath something else. What was above it? What was most visible was a quality I had not associated with him before that morning. He was thinking, not in the way of a man constructing a counter-argument, but in the way of a man who has encountered a fact that does not fit his existing structure and is trying to decide what to do with the structure. He stood there for approximately 4 minutes. Then he picked up his tablet, and he left the operations room, and he went to his office. He did not return to the second-tier cadets. Another instructor completed the afternoon's instruction. When I passed his office on my way to the records room, the door was closed and the light was on, and I heard nothing from inside. And I filed my administrative attendance report and put it with the others, and did not write anything that I had seen. The Callow Run departed that evening. Once the board-to-passage protocols were completed, and the range authority had issued its all-clear certification, it had spent approximately 7 hours at the range boundary. Its crew had at no point been required to perform any action beyond the confirmation visit. There were no injured cadets. The drill had been a drill. Before it departed, Captain Cassidy sent a short communication to the range operations address. It came in on the standard civilian traffic channel. Senna logged it, flagged it for Commander Doss's review, and moved on. Doss's incident report does not mention this communication. I found it in the traffic log when I was assembling this record. It reads in full, Range Authority, Academy Station, 7. This is Callow Run, departing range boundary on cleared vector for 3rd Settlement Station transit. Confirm your drill cadets are all present and accounted for. Glad we were close. Safe operations to you. Cassidy Master, Callow Run. That is the whole message. Glad we were close. They had been 4 light hours away, running a freight corridor with engagement history and hull scars from a breacher charge and suppression systems active on a routine run, and when an unknown distress beacon crossed their path, they had turned toward it without hesitation and refused an all-clear advisory from a military installation because their own protocol said you confirm visually before you stand down, regardless of what the advisory says. Glad we were close. I think about that phrase. I have thought about it for 11 years, in the spaces between other work. Glad implies that the alternative, not being close, not catching the beacon, not arriving, was a possibility that mattered to Cassidy and his crew, that they would have minded in some practical and personal way, if they had not been in range. They had 9 people aboard, a ship with the scars of 4 engagements, a medical base stocked for 12 trauma patients, and an institutional culture that responded to a distress marker by turning toward it, as a matter of course, in contested space, without being asked. Glad we were close. I said I had one additional source for this record. I will name her now. Cadet Primary Veth Asa was one of the 12 cadets on the range during the Tier 3 drill. She was, at the time, 20 years old and 3 months into her 3rd tier, which meant she had been at the academy for 2 years and was on track for a commission in the Imperial Survey Branch. She is now Commander Veth Osa of the Border Observation Flotilla, posted at the outer edge of the transit corridor, and she sent me a message 8 months ago when she read my promotion notice in the Academy's quarterly record. We had met once, briefly, in the records room, when she came to retrieve a training transcript. She had remembered me. She said she had thought about contacting me for years, because she had been told, informally, that I had been in the gallery on the day of the Grid 7 incident, and she wanted to know what I had seen from above. We exchanged several messages. In one of them, she told me what it had been like on the range. She said that when the drill coordinator advised them that an unscheduled vessel was inbound on the beacon, that the all-clear had been issued, but the vessel was continuing approach. The cadets in their scout frames had done what cadets do. They had run identification on the incoming contact and gotten the Callow Run's registry, and they had passed the information between themselves on the unit channel. She said the first reaction, among several of the cadets, was dismissal. Freight hauler. No military markers. They were Tier 3 cadets of the Imperial Academy, The incoming vessel was a civilian freighter. The appropriate emotion was mild curiosity, possibly mild irritation at the extension of the drill window. She said that the curiosity lasted until the PHAV scan data came through to the scout frame units, the same scan data that was going to DOS's console in the operations room. And they could see the suppression systems and the medical inventory, and then the hull survey and the engagement scarring. She said there was a long silence on the unit channel. She said that Cadet Secondary Oren, the unit's second in command, now a commissioned officer in the Imperial Patrol Fleet, was the one who finally said, on the channel, in a voice that Asa described as careful and quiet, "Do you think they do this often?" Nobody answered him directly, but Asa said she had looked at the approach track on her scout frame display. That steady, unhurried line. And she had thought about the hull scars and the medical inventory for 12 patients on a 9-person crew, and the suppression systems on a freight run. And she had understood, in the way you understand things when you are 20, and paying attention and you are not yet certain what all the implications are, that this was a vessel with a particular kind of history, and that the history was ordinary to the people aboard it. She told me, I thought about Commander Doss's lectures. Not in a disrespectful way, just. I had heard him so many times on the subject of what humans could and couldn't sustain. And I looked at that approach track and I thought, wonder if he's seeing what I'm seeing. I asked her what she thought about it now, 11 years later. She wrote back the next day. She said, I'm posted at the outer edge of the transit corridor. The approach vector that the Callow Run was using, the one with the engagement history, Tilla patrols it. We write mission supplements. We run in support pairs. We do not run that vector with fewer than 3 hulls. Face. And carriers run it with suppression systems and a good scan crew, and whatever else they've worked out over 20+ years of doing the run. Some of them have been running it longer than I've been alive. I don't think Commander Doss was wrong about everything he published. I think there were things he didn't have in his data. I think the Callow Run was one of those things. And I think he knew it by the time Cassidy left. And I think that's why he never gave that lecture again. I asked her how she knew he never gave the lecture again. She said she had checked. She had access to the Academy's curriculum records through her flotilla's liaison office. And she had pulled Doss's teaching logs for the 3 years following the Grid 7 incident and the unit on force asymmetry and biological limiting factors, the unit he had written and taught and published on and built his reputation around, been reassigned to a different instructor within 6 months of the incident, and had not appeared in Doss's teaching schedule again for the remaining 2.5 years of his posting at the Academy before his transfer to the Fleet Logistics Command. He hadn't been removed from it. The records showed a voluntary reassignment request. He had asked to give it to someone else. I have thought about what to make of this, and I have decided to make only what the record supports, and not what it invites. The record supports this. Haleth Doss was a rigorous scholar and a serious officer, and he encountered a data point his framework did not accommodate, and he was honest enough. In the private architecture of his own judgment, whatever his public posture may have been, to act on that encounter. The voluntary reassignment of his most prominent teaching unit is not the action of a man who has dismissed what he saw. It is the action of a man who has decided he is no longer the right person to teach it. That is not a small thing. The record also supports this. A 9-person crew on a bulk cargo freighter, running a contested freight corridor on what appears to have been a routine basis toward an unknown distress beacon without authorization or requirement, fused a stand-down advisory from a military installation on the grounds that their own protocol said you confirm 4 light hours in under 4 hours with active suppression systems and a medical bay stocked for casualties they did not yet know would not be there. Completed a verification meeting with the professional courtesy of a crew that has done this before, sent a 2-line departure message that said they were glad they were close, and continued to their delivery point. Their manifest cleared 3rd settlement station on schedule. According to the border passage freight logs I checked when compiling this record, 3 days after they left our range boundary, on time, as if the detour had been a small thing. Here is what strikes me, 11 years on, as the archivist I have become, rather than the junior clerk I was. I have processed, in the course of my career at this institution, something on the order of 40,000 incident reports. I have read the after-action documents from 3 actual combat engagements involving Academy-affiliated units. I have reviewed the operational logs of Imperial patrol vessels that specialize in contested corridor work. I know what it looks like when an organization has built itself over years and generations, a particular kind of difficult operational environment. It looks like the Callow Run. It looks like a ship that knows the medical inventory it needs before the need arises. It looks like suppression systems maintained at operational readiness on a route that most other vessels treat as a special condition, a reason to write supplements, a thing you prepare for carefully and do not run without support. It looks like a captain who, when asked about the engagement scars on his hull, describes them in the tone of a man for whom this is the texture of the work, rather than the exception to it. Doss's framework was not entirely wrong. There is data supporting many of his conclusions, and I am not qualified to dispute the neurochemical modeling or the engagement degradation curves. What his framework lacked was not accuracy in what it measured. What it lacked was any accounting for what it didn't think to measure. The cumulative, institutional memory of a culture that has been running difficult corridors for 22 years and has built, through whatever combination of necessity and nature, the reflex of turning toward a distress beacon rather than logging it and continuing on. The Callow Run was not an anomaly. That is the thing Doss could not have gotten from his archive footage and his after-action reports. It was a data point that represented something his instruments had never been calibrated to see. Not a sprint, not a burst. A unit, performing at peak before the stress chemical degradation set in. It was something that had been doing this long enough that the medical bay was stocked before the run began, and the suppression systems were already cycling when they crossed into range. And the captain's voice on the channel was calm, not because the situation was comfortable, but because the situation was familiar. I do not know whether the Callow Run is still running that corridor. I know that as of 4 years ago it was. OSA's flotilla logged it in a routine traffic survey. I know that its suppression systems were still active on the outer approach vector, and its registry still showed no military classification. And it had taken on a new crew member since the Grid 7 incident, bringing the complement to 10. I don't know what any of those 10 people think about what they do. I have no record of their interior assessment of their work. What I have is the approach track on the navigation display, steady and unhurried, coming in on a beacon that no one aimed at them, in a sector where they had no obligation to be, with a medical bay stocked for the worst, and a captain who said they were glad they were close. I am filing this record 11 years late, because it took me 11 years to be sure I had the standing to write it plainly, and because the record that exists is incomplete, and because incomplete records are a professional failure, I am no longer willing to accommodate. Beacon was misfired, the humans answered. Instructor Commander Doss did not finish his lecture. That is what happened. I am the senior archivist keeper of the Veteran Imperial Combat Academy, and I am recording it now, and I am signing my name to it. Send till Senior Archivist Keeper Veteran Imperial Combat Academy 6th Interval, Year 11.